So we need to talk a little bit more about the future Battlefield game tech reveal teaser thing that we got at EA Play last night. We need to clear up some misconceptions that people are having. And also, we should probably talk about a major gaming website saying that Battlefield 6 will be a modern shooter. The rumour mill around Battlefield, it's fired right back up again after last night. So to stay up to date with all the Battlefield information for Battlefield 6, Battlefield 2021, whatever it's called, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you've got notifications set to all. That way you'll make sure that you always get video notifications from this channel. But just before we go any further, today's video is sponsored by NordVPN. NordVPN helps protect you whilst you're online, and it can help unlock certain geographical restrictions so you can enjoy different countries' Netflix libraries. VPNs protect your data whilst you're out in public or you're traveling, maybe you're connecting to unsecured Wi-Fi networks in coffee shops or airports, and it can protect you at home as well. NordVPN has thousands of super fast servers in over 60 countries, and they don't log your data at all. It works on almost all operating systems like Windows, macOS, Android, and iOS. You can try NordVPN risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee, and if that's not enough for you, you can head to nordvpn.org/Westie and use the code Westie to get 70% off a 3-year plan, and you'll get an extra month completely free. Pretty killer deal if you ask me. So click that link at the top of the description and go check it out. Okay, so let's start by clearing up some of these misconceptions about this teaser that we got last night. The first big one, the one that most people are talking about, the soldiers in the wide-angle shot with them all running about. Yes, they are dressed up as World War II soldiers and they're holding World War II weapons. Specifically, they appear to be carbon copies of the Japanese soldiers used in Battlefield 5. Now, some people have taken this to mean that Battlefield 6 will also be a World War II game. And to me, instantly, it was clear that that was not going to happen. What we're looking at here is purely some kind of demonstration of something that DICE is working on for Battlefield 6. At the bottom of the screen, the words "Work in Progress" are clearly displayed, signaling to you that this is not final in any way. It also signals that this is not how the end product is likely to function or likely to look. And that makes sense because the assets on show are clearly from Battlefield 5. Those assets will be placeholders. They're there to fill in the gaps that will then be filled by new assets as and when they're ready. There are two possible scenarios that we are looking at here with this big scene with all these soldiers. One of them is opening up the potential player count for Battlefield games, moving beyond 64 players for the first time. And secondly, it could be a display of AI soldiers that DICE is planning to add into Battlefield 6 to bolster the player count alongside maintaining 64 real players per server. Again, opening up the battle, but in a slightly different way. At this time, it's almost completely impossible to tell what this really is, but the general feeling appears to be that DICE is looking to go beyond 64 players in some way. And as I mentioned in my video last night, with Battlefield now being outnumbered by games such as Fortnite, Warzone and PUBG, a certain move has to be made. Next generation is going to allow for better graphics, larger environments and better performance, so it makes sense that DICE would choose their first Battlefield game on the next generation consoles to scale up the player count, scale up the battlefields that we're playing on. Going from 64 to possibly 128 players, that sounds like a really small change. I mean, yes, it's a big change, like doubling the amount of numbers, but when you say it, 64 to 128, doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but that would have a huge effect on how Battlefield plays. It will come with a lot of complexity, linking into player movement, weapon balance, map design, vehicle behavior, and even more. A change like this will likely change Battlefield in a way that no previous game has ever done before. But I'd argue that this is probably the best time for DICE to do it. Next up, we'll talk about the facial animation shots. Lots of people overnight have been speculating that this guy could be an older Henry Blackburn, who was one of the characters from the Battlefield 3 campaign. Some of you might remember that there was also a Clyde Blackburn featured in Battlefield 1's War Story campaign in the Friends in High Places element. He was confirmed to be an ancestor of Henry Blackburn, and that somewhat linked Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 3 together. Of course, you'd only know this if you'd played both of the campaigns, but the link is there. Now, personally, I can't really see the resemblance between this guy we got to see last night and Henry Blackburn from Battlefield 3, so maybe some people are just trying to see something that they want to see. That maybe Battlefield 6 is sort of being influenced by Battlefield 3, maybe continuing the story of those characters from the single player. Who really knows at the moment? I did say in my video last night that this segment did look like something that would fit into a single player element of the game, the facial animations being something that you'd look for in the cutscenes as part of a story, more so than something you'd look for in a multiplayer setting. So there might be some truth to the likeness, but ultimately, I think this shot was really just to show the graphical fidelity that can be achieved with the Frostbite engine with next-generation console hardware. I think people might have just got a little bit carried away with everything that's been mentioned at the moment. Obviously, there's those rumours about a Battlefield 3 remaster happening, although it's pretty clear that's not happening because the time to announce that would have been last night, so that's clearly not happening anymore. So the fact people think this looks like Henry Blackburn from a previous Battlefield game, maybe people are just getting a little bit carried away here. And then, there's something I actually forgot to include in my video yesterday. There's a very short snapshot of some sort of dynamic destruction happening here. It's using the same white grey box environment as the soldiers running about, so we can assume that this was also in reference to the new technology that the next Battlefield game is going to use. But the destruction animation on show is a lot smoother and fairly more realistic than what we've seen in past Battlefield titles. Battlefield 1 and 5, those games did make some big steps forward in destruction dynamics compared to Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. Those games somewhat regressed with the technology. It was nowhere near as dynamic. But this thing looks to take it to a new level. The exploded portion of the building, it sort of moves right down as a whole structure, as a collapsing building would do, until it hits something solid underneath when it starts to disintegrate. And then you've got smaller blocks and shards breaking off around the sides, elements that would have connected the falling piece and the unbroken piece together. So this might indicate, especially with the scale that they're trying to show here, larger scale destruction happening again in the next Battlefield game. Kind of like what we saw in Battlefield 4 with the days of Levolution. Those would completely change how the map played through the use of some kind of massive destruction element. Now, I thought at the time that these set pieces, these Levolution elements, they were technically impressive, but most of the time they actually failed to make the map any better than what it was before. Seas of Shanghai, that was ultimately a worse map once the tower came down. Lankang Dam, that was already a pretty bad map anyway, and it was made worse when the dam exploded. So I hope that then in Battlefield 6, if this large-scale destruction is set to be a thing and it's going to be more regular, that it is more player-controlled, rather than running up to a console and then clicking a button or something, and that it doesn't sacrifice map design or flow for the sake of being flashy for a trailer. Okay, so that's clearing up the teaser done. Now let's move on to quickly mention this perhaps more legitimate Battlefield 6 chatter. Jeff Grubb, who writes for VentureBeat, which is a gaming website, before EA Play started, he laid out a bunch of predictions and statements based on information that he might have had, things that he'd heard through the industry, and basically just put together a prediction list for what EA was going to show. And for the most part, he was pretty much on the nose. He stated that he knew Skate 4 was being announced as well. That was a big surprise to everybody, and it came right at the end of the show. Now, in a later tweet that was linked to the originals, he stated that Battlefield 6, and he used Roman numerals in his tweet, would be a modern shooter title. And he also said that the rumoured Bad Company remaster from a couple of years ago, that had now been cancelled, and no development was happening on it. So this mention of a modern Battlefield game tied together with the previous mention by a leaker that Battlefield 6 would be a modern shooter, it is starting to come together here. Obviously, we should take any rumours, any leaks with a pinch of salt, but they are starting to somewhat align together. They're starting to mirror each other. And there is obviously a little bit more legitimacy now to the words that are being spoken. When the information comes from a games journalist who has sources within the industry, then I guess you can add a little bit more weight to the claims as well. Battlefield 6 is almost certainly a modern shooter, and that is great news in my opinion. So, there you go. A little bit of a roundup, a bit of a clear up about what happened last night for the future of the Battlefield franchise. As I said in my video yesterday, this is probably the last bit of information we get for Battlefield 6 for quite some time. We'll probably be waiting until early 2021 for our next bit of information, potentially a reveal show in March, April, May time. But for now, thanks very much for watching. Keep your eyes and ears on the channel for more Battlefield 6 content, and I'll catch you all in the next one.